director of the Center for Urban Education, Equity, and Improvement. I mean, I don't know what Ron doesn't do. So he has all of those things. He's known as an equity and anti-racist freedom fighter. He was just appointed associate professor. He is the first African-American in the School of Education's history to earn this distinction at Cabrini University. Ron has just published extensively. I mean, 27 publications in 6 years. He's secured grants. He's launched more recently the Deep Impact program at Cabrini, which is centered around grow your own initiatives to bring students of color into the profession. And like I said, Ron has just been working alongside us in supporting us to elevate the competencies which he co-developed into Chapter 49. He's implemented them at Cabrini. He has, he's put them into practice. He has recruited students of color. He's leading multiple projects in that space. And so we just want to elevate Ron's voice, especially because Black men, especially in that space, don't always get recognized for their work. So Ron, thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much to my phenomenal colleague, Donna Marie. You know what you mean to me. Thank you so much. Juliet, again, thank you for just the opportunity to share, but most importantly, just being a phenomenal colleague. And I think I can share my screen. Thank you. Hopefully everyone can see. So what I want to do in our brief time together is, kind of share a little bit about my story, but as mentioned, we have some larger problems that we still have to grapple with. So hopefully that will lead to a deeper conversation. So before getting started, I just wanted to say a thank you again to my phenomenal colleagues, Juliet, Donna Marie. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. Not just your support with this work, but even with the tenure process. Juliet, you wrote me a phenomenal letter of support, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. I also see Dr. Nicole Holland-Sims. Thank you so much for the work you're doing at the state level, and also for rendering a letter of support. But most importantly, to the greater PEDC community. It's just an honor to know that I'm in a battle with you. So thank you so much. So I want to situate my remarks by sharing. So when I got the news about a month ago that the Board of Trustees approved my tenure, obviously it was a joyous occasion. But here's what I wrote on Instagram, and I think it helps to situate my brief remarks, but hopefully the remarks that we will have as the greater community. Here's what I said. Certainly, I know that my scholarship, whether that's 27 publications in 6 years, many more in the pipeline, grants portfolio, over $500,000, secured book contracts, holistic service, and classroom expertise provided me a strong application portfolio. However, I want to celebrate my community who aided in this professional accomplishment. So when I think about the community, when I think about my story, how I got to this point, I have to go back and remember people who really supported me. So whether that was during my time at the University of Pennsylvania and me being a little bit insecure because at the time I didn't think that my writing was on par to be a scholar, and Dr. Howard Stevenson really supporting me, and then me getting the opportunity to work with Dr. Stevenson for close to 3 years in different capacities with his play project, and also co-teaching a course with him on Black males. Dr. Sean Harper, even though I wasn't in his program, Harp was very instrumental just in terms of just getting me books, like literally the books he's publishing, and everyone else is paying $50, $70 for him. He's giving me books and giving me encouragement. Then when I shifted to Duquesne University, because at the time they really had a phenomenal educational leadership powerhouse team, and getting the opportunity to work with Dr. Rick McCown, who's highly regarded in the field, Dr. Darius Pryor, Dean Gretchen Generette, who also her scholarship on narrative is very important. I look at this community who sold into me, but not only that, I've had the opportunity, when I think about the publications, I had senior scholars who said, look, we support what you're doing, and we, want to be a part of the work that you're doing. So getting the opportunity as a junior faculty member, and quite frankly, even as a graduate student, to publish with Dr. Adriel Hilton and Dr. Muhammad Khalifa, Dr. Rodney Hobson, and so many others, has really helped me in terms of developing those scholarly muscles that we need. But then transition into Cabrini University and still getting that external support from senior scholars and public intellects to kind of bless some of the work that we're doing at Cabrini, at the Center for Urban Education, Equity, and Improvement, and to have Dr. Chance Lewis, really sit down and share some, pretty much some success tips with me. Dr. Rich Milner, my first speaker, for our Dr. Shirley Dixon Celebration of Urban Education Symposium. But beyond that, just being a mentor, beyond that, being a friend, someone who's highly regarded in academia, but he'll just send me a text message out the blue just to check on me. Dr. Sonia Douglas Horsford, I know many of us are familiar with her work, but particularly the work that now she's leading at Teachers College, and this huge contract that she just received with the state of New York, to really redevelop their curriculum around Black history. Dr. Jackson down at Texas A&M, even Dr. Davis here at Temple, being a keynote speaker, Julia, if you remember that a few years ago, with the PA NAME conference last year, Dr. Eddie Glaude, and forthcoming Dr. Cornell West, as he'll be a speaker this year. So again, so many individuals that are prominent in academia, prominent in terms of the work that they're leading, but really just supporting the work that I'm doing out there in Radnor. But then, as mentioned, the greater PEDC community, formerly A2E, as we really bonded over the last 3.5 to 4 years, really wrestling with what could equity look like. But just to share a little bit about who I am, for some people, they see me as an anti-racist educator. That's some of the work that I do. That's my scholarship. That's the classes that I develop at Cabrini and that I teach. For organizations, they may feel as though, well, you know what? He's a DEI strategist. He helps organizations to really wrestle with what could an inclusivity infrastructure look like. For some, since I do this work in the CRSE space, he's a pedagogical theorist that kind of stands on the seminal work that Gloria Ladson-Billings, Geneva Gay, Dr. Paris, so many others are doing. But, I would argue I'm one that comes in the Black prophetic tradition, meaning, I am committed to being a truth teller. And it has a lot of good with that, but also a lot of bad that I will share in terms of the things that we have to deal with. So all that to say, when we're wrestling with how do we support faculty of color, I would argue that university support is critically important. You have to have the support not only of your dean and your department chair, but also your college and school of education and the greater university. Thankfully, albeit we're not perfect and we still have a lot of issues, I have the support of my dean, Dr. Beverly Bride, who really supports the work that I do. She advocates for me. I have that support within the School of Education. I have that support with Cabrini. Again, obviously, it's never going to be harmonious, but I do have a lot of cabinet support and board support for the work that I do. And I think that that's important because for critical scholars, we know that we're under attack. My work is in your face. I deal with the psychology of racism. I deal with issues related to DEI. I deal with culturally relevant and sustaining education. I deal with the predicament of African-American males. I deal with how do we situate Black church theology into the educational discourse. And over this last year, that support has been very important to me. And given the fact that for many of us who do this work around critical race theory, for many of us who do this work around equity, we know that we have been under attack, right? So that has personally been my story for this last year. This campaign seasons, I'm in political ad campaigns and they're using my likeness and they're using my image and they're using my words and my scholarship to advocate for individuals who were running for certain positions or, certain seats. So really having to deal with the backlash from the media. You go to YouTube sites and people are sending me stuff, and I go to YouTube sites and they have one of my talks and it's over 2,000 views and people are killing me. So anyone who's doing this work, around CRT and equity, we know over this last year, it's been extremely stressful. And I think that goes to, as much as we could celebrate success, not just me, but so many others who have earned tenure, we still have a lot of work to do. So what I want to say is the more things change, the more things stay the same. We're still dealing with systemic racism. We're still dealing with institutional racism. We're still dealing with a lot of stuff that, unfortunately, faculty of color have been dealing with for decades. So here's a couple of high-profile stories that many of us are familiar with. Nicole Hannah-Jones, many of us know about her tenure battle at UNC. Here's what she said: to be treated so shabbily by my alma mater, by a university that has given me so much, in which I only sought to give back, has been deeply painful. Someone who's doing great work, but at the same time, within her own institution that she graduated from, she had to deal with that. Obviously, Cornel West, he has since left Harvard University, but as he talked about, that Harvard is still suffering from decline and decay, and he calls it a spiritual rot. So we know about these high-profile cases, but not only that, Dr. Paul Harris, down at the University of Virginia, a scholar who's doing great work, who's publishing, who is out there as a leader in academia, particularly within his area of expertise. But at the same time, our work is still disrespected, right? It's disrespected. And he has since earned tenure at the University of Virginia, but only after a public, this public fight. And as individuals who reviewed this case, they would say, well, his work is self-published. So again, when we publish our scholarship and we publish within certain outlets, it's not given the same respect as our white colleagues. So the in-house fights that we have to deal with is very tiring. Now, when we talk about Nicole Hannah-Jones, Dr. Cornel West, Dr. Paul Harris, they had high-profile cases, but I would like to argue that there have been countless Dr. Wests and Dr. Harrises and Nicole Hannah-Jones throughout the years that have not gained that support, and we have not heard their stories. And unfortunately, they've had to leave academia. But not only that, we know that there's something called the invisible labor. When we are now the only one, or just one of a few within our institutions, we are asked to serve on basically everything. What you want us to serve. So you want us to teach, you want us to do scholarship, you want us to get the grants, you want our teaching to be exemplar, but yet you want us to serve on every committee. But unfortunately, then when it's time to go up for tenure, we are not given the credit for serving on those committees. Not only are we not given the credit oftentimes, but sometimes it's looked at as a bad thing. So it's crazy, the things that we have to deal with, this dance that we still have to contend with, specifically within white spaces. So all I'm trying to say is this, is that self-care is critically important, right? Any of us who's doing this work and we're on a tenure track and, we're in academia, we know that self-care is important. Many of us know what Jay-Z would say, it was all good just a week ago. And that's how many of us feel, that, we can be celebrated in one context, but then in another context, we are really dealing with these contentious battles. Over this last year, I had colleagues who have definitely disassociated themselves from me, given the fact that I had this external stuff going on because of my scholarship. I've had people that have said, I was told that I need to stay away from you because of this outside work. So self-care is very important. But not only that, we also have to understand that it's not just the external battles. I was very strategic in terms of when I was going to publish this article. And I knew I was getting close to tenure. So I published this article last year. It's titled "The Spook Who Sat by the Ivory Tower, a critical race theory narrative of a Black man's tenure track journey within the academy." I knew I could not publish the article in year 1 or year 2 because that could be looked at as a bad thing. But when I talked about, pretty much my journey, I had to be honest in terms of the gains and the language and the look. I'll go a little bit more into that in a second, that I had to deal with within academia. For many of us, we're familiar with The Spook Who Sat by the Door. So I kind of embellished that classic book and movie to kind of share my journey. So within this article, I introduced 3 things that faculty of color have to deal with. And I said, that's the look. When we walk into rooms, when we walk into the classroom, we have to deal with the look. Because for many of us, when we're going into these spaces, we realize that for our white colleagues or our white students, they're giving us the look like, you know what, who are you? Why are you here? And I'm not going to view you as an expert. But not only that, we have to deal with the language that our colleagues will give to us. Let's just call it microaggressions. We have to deal with the language in the email responses. But then I just say, overall, we're dealing with the games. It's a game that we know that we're in, that it's an unfair game. And we have to navigate these games day in and day out. And if we're not careful, it can lead to what Dr. Smith, many of us, we're familiar with his work, which he calls racial battle fatigue. So when I just want to conclude, hopefully it leads us to a greater conversation when we think about the implications of all of this, and particularly for PEDC. How can we advocate for faculty equity in Pennsylvania? As mentioned, since I joined this work over 4 years ago, I've been very honest. As much as I understand the importance, as much as I'm on the front lines for diversity within pre-K-12 spaces, I also understand that if we don't get our institutions together, if we don't get IHEs together, for me, I'm really afraid of the sustainability of this work. Yeah, the same way that we're advocating for pipeline programs in pre-K-12 spaces, we also understand that we have work to do in higher education. What are some collaboration opportunities that exist for IHEs? When we think about the member institutions, Cabrini, Newman, Westchester, Arcadia, so many more, Temple, LaSalle. What are some collaboration opportunities for faculty of color? Is that some sub work in terms of a sub consortium, how we can support one another, how we can start to develop policies? But then also, what could a faculty of color affinity program look like across institutions? Given the fact that for many of us, we are that only one, or we're one of 2, we need to think, on a higher level in terms of a faculty of color affinity program across institutions, the ways in which we can support one another. So once again, thank you for the opportunity to share, and hopefully it leads to a greater conversation.